Hi, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Crush It in Sales podcast. I'm your host, Melinda Van Fleet, and I am very appreciative that you joined me today. I want to talk about mental fortitude. This is, I don't even know where this word first came from. It's a word as old as the hills. And when I Google it, I'm going to read this. It means mental and emotional strength in facing difficulty, adversity, danger, or temptation courageously. Never once did her fortitude waver during that long illness. And you can hear my dogs crying in the background. Never once did my fortitude waver that they want my attention. That's why they're crying. Where I'm going with this is really thinking about the podcast that Ryan and I just did together on the Good Karma Success Coach podcast. If you listen to that podcast, you know that Ryan and I do a podcast together once a month. And last month, I actually put it on the Crush It in Sales podcast. And it was kind of funny that it didn't really land. I didn't have the best numbers for that podcast, which is kind of interesting always. I guess you think that people listen to both, but people end up listening to one or the other. But anyhow, it's kind of fascinating when you look at statistics. But the podcast that I'm referring to is one called Mental Distractions with Ryan Van Fleet. And we were talking about how, distractions aren't just social media or all these things that we think of, getting into a Netflix series and binging all day and not having great time management skills around distractions like that. But there can also be mental distractions. And I loved recording that podcast with Ryan because we hadn't talked about the actual, drilling down of the distractions that we were going to share on that podcast. And he ended up sharing his thoughts on mental distractions, which was kind of where my head was at too. So it was really cool. So that podcast episode is 187 if you haven't listened to that yet and wish to. But always after I record a podcast, I end up thinking even more. It brings me down all these other mind loops and rabbit holes, especially on my walks. And I started thinking about my niece, Sydney Bryn. And it was perfect timing because Sydney is starting her competition series for dance. And I have two nieces. One is Sienna. She is 16 and she podcasts also with me on the Good Karma Success Coach podcast. If you listen, you know that. And then my younger niece is Sydney, and she is an amazing dancer. And I think it's her 4th year. I'd have to ask my sister for sure to really confirm because years go by so fast. But 4th year, and it's truly incredible what she has accomplished. She technically, quote unquote, started her dancing late, which is crazy to me that we think that starting something at 11 years old is late. And now she's 13. And I wrote about her and the experience that she was having so far as through my eyes in terms of, mental fortitude back in, I'm looking at that state. It was on Medium. I wrote this article, November 2020. And the title of the article is How to Show Up and Keep Going. Have you ever wished you could be 12 again? And I'm going to put the link to this Medium article in the show notes. But I wrote about her mental fortitude. Again, when she started, she was considered old because she was 11. I wrote the article when she was 12, so 11. And it's amazing how she just was like, whatever, I'm going to keep going. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a great job. I'm going to learn the scorpion. All these girls, we're all going to be friends and we're going to support each other. And she did. She did. And her first year, the teacher kind of ignored her. She was in the back row. She wasn't really, part of all the superstars of the group. And she really proved herself. She practiced and practiced and practiced and took it so seriously. I mean, you can't have a conversation with her in my sister's house without her legs flying everywhere and her doing twirls and she just keeps on dancing like and she just doesn't stop. So it's really, really amazing. So in this article, I wrote about using my bucket tool, which is a tool that I've talked about for years that I had developed when I was a buyer, and how I compartmentalize things in my brain. So I wanted to share this tool with you because in thinking about Sydney, she really just kept on going. She kept on going against all odds, against mental distractions and things people were saying and probably how she felt and other people's energy. And she just kept on going. She kept showing up for practice, practicing on her own, and she kept on going. And last night when I watched her via video, they had their first competition in Schaumburg for the season. She had her solo, and you know what? She effing crushed it. Even the expressions on her face were like all in character. She did amazing. And I just was blown away as her super proud aunt to be like watching and cheering her on because she did it. She did it. And quite frankly, she did it on her own. Yes, her mom is, my sister is extremely supportive. The entire family is supportive. But you know what? It was Sydney. She did it. She practiced and practiced and practiced and always had such a positive, positive attitude and kept on going. So if she can inspire anyone out there today, that is why I wanted to share this and then share my tool, because sometimes we just need that little kick in the butt that, what, heck, if this, 11-year-old who's now a 13-year-old can do it and push through adversity and, all the things out there that people have to deal with from adults, judgment. I saw a meme today on Facebook about, why do kids bully? Well, they're learning it from an adult. Well, think about that. That could likely be true. And so where do other kids pick up, their behavior in terms of saying, oh, you're too old, you're never going to have a solo, you're never going to learn that move and then be in the front of the dance line, which is what happened to her last year. She learned the scorpion and then she ended up getting moved to the front of the dance line from the back. Like, that's a huge thing as a dancer. If you've ever been a dancer, you know that you want to be in the front. You don't want to be, buried in the back. So, that happened to her last year and she was so nervous, I remember, and then she was so proud. So it was really, really cool. So I'm going to share my bucket tool. So if you know someone that's out there struggling with not having a positive mindset, if they're struggling with mental fortitude, if they're struggling with distractions of what other people are saying, and also you can feel their energy, I highly recommend just taking some time. Give yourself grace in this process. It's not always easy for people, especially if it's family members that are affecting you or friends or neighbors or coworkers. We have to get real that not everyone in this world is supportive of our journeys. Like Ryan and I definitely went through that with sport fishing. It's not easy. People are not always going to rally behind you and tell you that you're doing the right thing. They often put doubt in your mind and can be very triggering. So I want to share this, and here we go. I'm going to read it, okay? Organizing your thoughts and next steps into 3 buckets can help. Bucket 1 is the easiest to address, and bucket 3 is the most difficult. If you break things down into 3 buckets, it helps take the pressure off and make your decision more manageable. First step, take time to think about the following and recognize what bucket is part of getting this process started. Bucket number 1, the other person's energy doesn't bother you and you can continue to move toward your goals. You recognize the behavior and can move on. Bucket number 2, the energy bothers you, but you can set boundaries and learn to set boundaries and move forward from there. And bucket number 3, the energy has you stuck and leads you into negative thought patterns. You can have a discussion or get some further help in dealing with the situation. If you can block this person or not associate with them, this may be the right path for you. Recognize it's okay to move on from people if you don't see the situation changing. Once you get into the habit of mentally putting challenging situations into buckets, it can help you move forward. Anyone can do this exercise. It takes some remembering and practice, but it's simple. So that's all I've got today. It could be pretty heavy if you're someone that is really struggling with mental distractions that are coming from other people. Other people telling you you're not doing the right thing, giving you their opinion, advice, judgment, any of those things. And I just want you to know that you are not alone. We have all been there at some point in our lives, and we'll probably all be there again with something, right? As we move forward on these journeys and evolve and grow in our life decisions, business, and paths. So please feel free to share this podcast with someone that may need it. I will put the links to the Good Karma Success Coach podcast that I did with Ryan, the one I mentioned, episode 187, along with this Medium article in the show notes. And feel free to connect with me on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, or Instagram. And my email is melinda@melindavanfleet.com. So until next week, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you crush it in sales. Thanks again.